Game 1 was Caruana versus Rapport, one of the more exciting games of today. The players opened with the Taimanov Sicilian before going a little off the beaten track again. By move 6, the players were entering Here Be Dragons territory of the opening at the master level and completely arrived in uncharted territory by move 9. Caruana took some risks with the 13th move G5, followed by F5, risking possible overextension or overaggression later on in the game. The gamble possibly didn't pay off for Caruana, who may have wanted to press a little more with the white pieces, but ended up in a congested position with a stuck queen. With threefold, the game came to a fairly bloodless and peaceful end by move 24. Fabiano started with e4 and Richard Rapport played the Sicilian, and in the Taimanov variation of the Sicilian, Fabi goes for the trendy g4 line. The idea of this move is not only to grab more space or attack the king side of black, but it's also an extended fianchetto, preparing simple developing moves such as bishop to g2 and eventually castles. Black responded with knight g to e7, bishop to e3, b5, bishop b5, knight to b3, and knight to a5. Already by move 9, the players get into untrodden territory here, and after taking on b3, a takes b3, and bishop to b7, looking over this diagonal. Bishop to g2, countering the bishop on b7, knight g6, and rook to f1. There was quite a funny joke made about this position where in the United States, Fabi had clearly not realized that you have to touch the king first in order to castle. But here, of course, it was his intention to play rook to f1. The idea was to free the h1 square for the bishop in case of knight h4 eventually, but the purpose of g5 is already hard to understand, which is this move over here. Our annotator suggested that from move 12 onwards, Fabi's moves looked a bit unnatural. So after a5, f4, and here is what we sort of discussed in the introduction about the possible overextension of Fabi's pawns, and after queen to a5, I believe in this position it was suggested to actually take bishop takes c3, queen takes c3, and castles in order for black to maintain a slight initiative. However, after queen a5, queen takes g7, a3, although it looks really dynamic, players soon agreed to a draw with threefold repetition. A very short but intriguing game. Game 2, we had Rajabov versus Deng. Rajabov opened with the Catalan, trying to get an edge against Deng, well known for his frequent use of the Catalan. Deng looked to be more in form than he had been in other games of the tournament so far, developing a small but consistent advantage against Rajabov and capitalizing on Rajabov's small errors. Making incremental progress and slowly improving the position, it was looking decidingly in Deng's favor by move 39, with Stockfish giving him a positional advantage equal to a knight or bishop, but tragically for Deng on move 40, with only 5 minutes left on the clock, he played the seemingly safe g6, potentially assuming that it changes a little in the position and would allow him more time to calculate more ambitious lines. But this was a blunder. Move 40, bishop takes d4 was required to keep his edge. Although Deng played this shortly after, it was too late, allowing white to escape from the threat and transition to a very equal-looking position. On move 50, the players agreed on a draw. Players entered one of the well-known lines of the Catalan. The position after the opening was equal but full of opportunities. So knight f3, b6, castles, bishop e7, all developing moves that we have seen before, queen e7, e3, and c5. Exchanging on d5, bishop takes d5, and here it's quite interesting to note that black could have captured d5 with the pawn, however decided to capture with the bishop instead. So bishop takes d5, queen to e2, taking on d4, some exchanges, and e4 by white. And after rook f to d8, rook takes c8, exchanging a pair of rooks. And by move 18 here, Tamer decided to play ambitiously and went for the aggressive f4 move. But eventually it backfired and turned out to be more of a weakening move, and possibly overextending on the king side, making the king slightly weak. And after b5, knight to d2, black has a very solid position, and it seems as though here, h3 was a small error made by white, and that rook d8 was the suggested follow-up for black here. And rook d8 was played, queen c2, and players repeated the move once, and h5 by black. But the position remained dynamic and unclear despite the small initiative for black here, and h4, knight g4, queen c3, and knight back. And it seemed to be that players were trying to reach that time control as I would, and that's a concept that I even learned as a young player, the concept of do not hurry. And basically what that does is either to gain a little bit more time on the clock or to reach a point where you do receive that additional time on move 40 that I believe the players received some more time. And with 59 seconds remaining on the clock, Rajabov played this move, e5. And I think this was also the moment that Ding Liren thought, okay, by taking the pawn on e5, he wasn't making any major changes to the position, but actually f5 was a really strong move for him to make. But having 9 minutes on 2 moves, Ding Liren doesn't realize, and f5 gives him a decisive advantage. So after f takes, and g6, white simply plays knight to g5, and Rajabov stabilizes the position again, and soon the game does end in a draw, exchanging the queens, a set of minor pieces, now having simply a rook ending. And by move 50, they shook hands and agreed to a draw. Game 3, we had Firouzja versus Duda. This encounter on paper seemed like it could be particularly exciting, with Firouzja's head-to-head record against Duda being 4 wins and 1 draw. In theory, it seemed it would be a ripe game for Firouzja to push a little, but after a slightly surprising loss against Nepomniachtchi yesterday, perhaps Firouzja preferred to not take any risks and to prevent a second loss and tilting. Duda played his usual Petrov defense against Firouzja 1e4, and both players went down a solid line of the Petrov, which once again proved its reliability again today. Neither players were able to create an imbalance or exploit a weakness from their opponent, as none were made. So, with a symmetrical pawn structure on the king side and just a queen on the board, by move 32, the players drew by threefold repetition shortly after. It was a bit surprising to see Alireza take a bit of time on every single move in the opening, since Duda has been playing his main repertoire, which is the Petrov. The World Cup 2021 winner has already played tens of games in this line, and today once again he proved the line to be solid. It was always equal in the game, and a draw was a logical result at the end. Sorry for the spoiler alert. So we're going to see how this game developed, and I really like the maneuver of knight to d2, knight to f1, and knight to g3, which we find is a very common theme, especially in games like the Italian and the Petrov here, exchanging on d3, knight a6, bishop to d2, and knight c7. White centralizes the rooks. Black decides to exchange a pair of rooks here and exchange on c4, playing b5. And after b5, we do see that quite a number of pieces do get exchanged, noting that the queen has gone to c7, to d8, back to d7, and here just exchanging. And I like this cute move, rook to a1, and then taking on d4 with queen f1 being played. And here we just have a queen ending with 3 pawns and a threefold repetition. How beautiful, how simple. In Game 4 of Round 5, we had Nakamura versus Nepomniachtchi. Another encounter with a lot of explosive potential was this matchup. Similar to Game 3, we saw another Petrov defense, an opening Nepomniachtchi employed against Wang Hao in the 2020 Candidates Tournament, and also in the 2021 World Championship match against Magnus Carlsen. The players went down a main line played by Kasparov, Anand, Kromnik, Ivanchuk, and Leko, among others, so a well-tested and dependable line. The first deviation came on move 14 with Rook A2, which Nakamura had previously played with and won against his opponent in 2016. However, Nepomniachtchi found a better move 14 Bishop to F8, which compatriot Kirill Lysenko had faced again in 2017 and went on to win. Whilst the position out of the opening looked quite equal, Nepomniachtchi played the risky chess he is known for, with a series of inaccurate and imbalancing moves that Nakamura seized upon. Nepomniachtchi on the back foot defended tenaciously. A soft draw offer with the position repeated 2 times was made around move 22, but Nakamura ultimately decided to press on. A few moves later, the position now looked to be more in Nepomniachtchi's favor, and Nakamura was in time trouble with 6 minutes to make 6 moves to reach the additional time control. Consequently, a repetition was made again, with both players opting for it this time. And as we mentioned, the last game of the day, both sides entered the main line of the Petrov defense. Jan decided to play the old variation that was used to be played 20 years ago. It was the main repertoire of Kromnik with black against e4. So we have c4, knight to b4, bishop e2, knight c3, and exchanging on c3. Knight c6, rook e1, rook e8, and rook to a2 came as a surprise for Nepo, as he spent 17 minutes before making his next move. So we really like to see this strange looking move in action here. Bishop to f8, and after c takes d5, queen takes d5, c4, queen e4. It was considered a minor inaccuracy, and that queen d7 was slightly better. So after queen to e4, bishop to f1, and queen to g4. Another inaccuracy, it seems that queen b1 was slightly better, here just taking advantage of the fact that the rook is no longer on a1. h3, and rook takes e1, queen takes e1, and queen back to e4. And I really like this position because I was actually taking a look at it live too. And the sole lead of the tournament didn't retreat his queen correctly, and that's when the troubles started. White's position was clearly better, and Naka would dominate along the open file of the board, and Black's queen hadn't many squares and could potentially get trapped. However, the direct win was not obvious. So what was quite interesting here that I checked was queen to d3, and knight to h4. Of course, knight takes d4, attacking the rook and also defending the bishop on f5 is not a great alternative because of rook to d2, and it's GG. But here instead, White decided to play rook to b2 and queen back to e4, rook e2, queen d3, and rook to e3. The biggest chance Naka had on move 23 he could have played, and here Black responds with queen to b1, d5, knight e7, and knight to d2, attacking the queen once again. And after a few inaccuracies, White lost all his advantage. It was obvious from his body language. Now Nakamura was disappointed, and he realized he had to go for a threefold repetition later on. So knight b3, bishop d2, and after knight c6 here, bishop d7, and we see the threefold repetition in action. So all in all, it was a peaceful day at the office for all 8 players. And as we could see, there was some exciting games and some frustration over the board from Ding Liren, who had the chance to gain an advantage over Timur Rajabov in that very tricky position where they were really low on time. And of course, Nakamura realizing that he could have perhaps gotten something out of that position with the white pieces against Jan Nepomniachtchi, who is the sole lead at the moment of the tournament. I'm pretty sure that we'll be seeing some more action-packed games tomorrow, with Friday being a rest day players are going to be playing their hearts out. So we're going to have Timur Rajabov playing with the white pieces against Richard Rapport, Ali Reza versus Fabriano, Hikaru Nakamura versus Ding Liren, and Jan Nepomniachtchi versus Jan-Christoph Duda. So I know for a fact that I'm going to be staying tuned to the games live. I hope to see your name over there watching the games on Lichess live and eating your popcorn. But yes, I will see you tomorrow, and hope you have a great day.